Okay, got the hammers off the tub grinder that I'm working on. um, Going through and making sure they all weigh the same. And what's interesting is about, let's see, what do we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. About, I don't know, probably 9 or 10 of them were actually a pound under what the heaviest ones were. There's actually like two different styles of hammers that were on this tub grinder, and I call them hammers. I don't know what the proper term or what anybody else calls them. And yeah, it looks like you can get a idea there, but some of these are actually a bit larger, and you can see the mounting hole for the tooth is a little bit taller, and the overall shape, like this curved section here, is actually a little bit higher on what appear to be the older hammers. What are the older hammers? Most of these here are actually replacement hammers. And in the case of this one here, you can see it's essentially brand new. These wear extremely, I don't know about extremely quickly. And of course, it depends on how people keep up with the teeth on it and everything. But these are definitely a wear item for a tub grinder. And some of these you can see are essentially brand new. They've only been used for, I would imagine, only a couple hours or so. The heaviest hammer that was on this thing was 10 pounds, 9 ounces. The lightest hammer that I found, if I remember right, was 9 pounds, 11 ounces. And so probably about 9 or so of these hammers were essentially a pound underweight, which is just fucking nuts. And I don't know how that happened. Somebody didn't notice or whatever. And, I guess if you're buying replacement hammers, you would assume that they'd at least be close. But I wasn't involved with that process. I don't know what the fuck happened. So I decided what to do was to increase the weight of the lighter hammers up to 10 pounds, 9 ounces. And I was doing that with FluxCore 045 FluxCore Hobart Fab Shield 21B. Just a really common FluxCore wire, just because it's a little bit easier than swapping out stick electrodes. And I had never used that individual wire before and figured I'd fuck around with it. The slide comes off really quite easy once it's cooled down. And it'll do that pretty hot too, actually, when the weld is still pretty fresh. But you can see here there's just a shitload of spatter everywhere. I was using Lincoln NR211 before, and it didn't have, it probably had about the same amount of spatter, but it was, the BBs were smaller and they didn't stick as tightly. This comes off pretty easy, but it's a lot more than the Lincoln wire was. It's the first time I've used that Hobart wire. Maybe it's normal for that. I don't know. I looked up the voltage and wire speed recommendations from Hobart's website, and I'm right on there. 045 wire, I'm running 18 volts and 200 inches a minute. If somebody has experience with this wire, is this normal? I don't know. But the best way I found to deal with that is to get one of these grinding wheels that has the built-in nut. And in the case of this grinder, I had to add a jam nut to space it out a little bit. And then that way the shaft of the grinder will be inset. And so you can grind completely and totally flush with the wheel. And it feels like you're getting hit with fucking shrapnel from like a frag grenade or some shit when you're doing that. But it works really quick. But, so, here's the hammers. And anybody who's been around a tub grinder before, these are the cutest hammers I have ever seen, and it is the cutest tub grinder that I have ever seen. But the way that this works is, if you watch my previous two videos, it wasn't about it. I wasn't talking specifically about it, but I showed the mill that these go into, and there's, I think, 24 of these or something like that. And they all mount on a big mill. Spins around. You can throw yard debris and that kind of shit in there, turn into like bark mulch and compost and what have you. But it's got these teeth that bolt in like so. And clean the spatter up, but it actually sit in there properly. But the teeth sit in there like so, bolt them down, spins around, grinds everything up. And these hammers actually don't wear too bad if you stay on top of these teeth. This one here is brand new, although slightly rusty. And the tooth, as you can see, is much greater dimension than the hammer is. So the tooth will actually protect the hammer so long as you don't let the tooth wear down too far. Tub grinders are one of those things like rock crushers or, something else that require a shitload of maintenance, like every single day. I always say, in the case of a tub grinder, I'd assume it's the same case as a rock crusher, although I've never actually worked on one. But if you get 6 hours of work out of an 8-hour day, you're doing pretty good. But hopefully you can see here, there's the frame of the tooth, which I would assume is forged, but I don't know for sure. And then there's this really fucking wicked hard facing on here, and it's got chunks of what I would assume would be tungsten carbide or something like that. I don't know for sure. If anybody knows what precisely this is and how in the fuck they apply it, I would assume it's welded on there, but I really don't know. And I would sure like to know, but it's some pretty gnarly stuff. And they put it on the teeth and on the tops of the hammers. But as far as weighing the hammers, I got really super fancy with it, and I went down to the local grocery store and just got a cute little scale and stuck it on there. And so this hammer is 9 pounds, 16 ounces. Yeah, you can kind of see that on there. So all I've been doing is going through and welding them up and weighing them and putting them in a pile of need to weld more or it's good to go. So all these hammers here have pretty much the same amount of weld on them. I welded on the back and on the front. You can see by comparison the heavy hammers, the bigger hammers, no weld on the backside and just a little bit on the front here. And it's not much at all. It's only one layer, I don't know what, 3/4 by 1/2 inch. And it was too heavy. I had to grind it off. But just goes to show that if you're working on one of these things, and if you're working on anything for that matter, don't assume anything. When working on this job, I wasn't originally going to pull the mill out and build it up and go through all these hammers and everything. Really just kind of from a time and cost perspective. I've already got a just, insane amount of time into this grinder and quite a bit of money for that matter too. And I didn't really want to, the job started out as like, fuck it, just get it running. It had been taken apart for a couple years. The job started out as, you know, fuck it, just put it together, get it running so we can sell it. And then the more that I got into it, the more I was kind of like, oh, well, this needs to be done, this needs to be done, this needs to be done, this needs to be done. And so, short story long, I originally wasn't going to pull the hammers off and weigh them and all that kind of stuff. And boy, am I glad I did, because I just assumed that they would all be the same weight. The thing vibrated like crazy before, but I assumed it was just because the mill was wore down so bad. But I am very, very glad that I took these apart, or took these off and started comparing them. And, you know, you could measure on the, when these hammers are installed in the grinder and everything's all back together and ready to work, you could measure to see that these were different. But if you didn't know to look for it, probably not some that, certainly not something that I would have done. Um, you know, I would have never assumed that it had these different ones on here. But I guess the point is, if you're working on one of these things and you get to the point where you're pulling the hammers off, don't assume anything, and certainly get a scale out and check it. That scale that I got from the grocery store, I think I paid like fucking $17 for or something. Granted, it's probably not the most accurate thing in the world, but it's going to be a lot more accurate than, you know, these hammers being a pound off. I wish I'd been videoing this thing from the start, but I didn't. So